be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Welcome to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Lovely to be with you again this evening. Thank you for your company. On tonight's show, we're going to be discussing visas. Does more need to be done to control cheap foreign labour, with legal migration now at record levels? We'll also be going back to the Gold Coast for an update on Nigel in I'm a Celebrity. What's been going down in the jungle? Quite a lot, it seems, particularly Offset. And we'll be discussing a new bank spying scandal. Stay tuned for all of that. But first, here's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Camilla, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, we start this bulletin with some breaking news. A convoy carrying more hostages abducted by Hamas in the 7th of October attacks has arrived at the Rafah border crossing in Egypt within the last half hour, and Israel's military says 2 of the hostages are now with IDF Special Forces. They're safe inside Israeli territory. This is happening right now in Egypt on the Rafah border crossing, the handover of Israeli hostages that have been away from their families for so long. We're also hearing that more Palestinian prisoners will be released tonight, marking the 6th day of the current pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas, the terror group, of course, that caused the abductions on the 7th of October. Keeping an eye on events in the Middle East for you tonight on GB News. Meanwhile, here in the UK, Sir Keir Starmer says the government is to blame for record migration numbers into the UK, as he promised to scrap laws that allow workers from overseas to be paid less than British workers. The Prime Minister and the Labour leader clashed during Prime Minister's questions today, with Sir Keir reminding MPs of the government's promise to reduce legal migration back in 2019. Rishi Sunak conceded that migration levels are still too high, but insisted the number was coming down. And Sir Elton John's been in Parliament today talking about a new project which aims to end all new transmissions of HIV in England by 2030. He was highlighting plans for HIV testing in A&E departments to be increased in a bid to detect people who have the virus who might not otherwise be tested. Experts say more than 4,000 people in England are believed to be living with HIV without actually knowing. Health and Social Care Secretary Victoria Atkins says it's an important step towards eradicating HIV.
We've seen from the scheme that has already rolled out across the highest prevalence areas that thousands of people can be helped with these early diagnoses, and then they can be given the support and the medical treatment they need to lead not just longer lives but also high quality lives.
Victoria Atkins there. Now, Nottingham City Council says it is in severe financial distress and is therefore unable to deliver a balanced budget. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has more.
Nottingham City Council has today announced that it cannot balance its budget, and the Chief Financial Officer has issued a Section 114 notice effectively declaring bankruptcy. That means that the Labour-led authority from today can only spend money on statutory services. Those are things like education, for roads, for children's services. Now the council must meet within 21 days to discuss what measures they will be putting in place. The council has already spent a number of years struggling with its finances, and today it has really come to a head.
Will Hollis. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks, Polly. Right, let's get into this immigration story. I mean, as you know, the PM is coming under increasing pressure, not just to stop the boats, but also to control legal migration. We had that astonishing figure, a record high of 745,000 coming into Britain in the year ending December 2020. It has caused a little bit of a row within the Tory party as to what to do. A lot of right-wingers are calling on the government to do much more. Sir John Hayes, for instance, said that 1.3 million migrants coming into the UK over a period of 2 years is a catastrophe for Britain and requires urgent legislation. The Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, was speaking about this in the House of Commons yesterday. This is what he had to say.
Well, I think my plan would have been brought to the House before last Christmas, if I could have done, but let's hope we can bring forward a substantive package of reforms very quickly. I'm working intensively with the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary. We are at one on this issue, and I hope that my honourable friend will not be disappointed.
Robert Jenrick there seemed to be suggesting that Number 10 has been dragging its heels on this issue. He's got a number of suggestions to try and bring that legal migration number down. He wants to change and clamp down on the number of dependents coming in on the back of visas, particularly student visas. He also has suggested that the visa route should be closed off or at least more restrictive to cheap foreign workers. There's even been a row between, we think, Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak over the idea of putting a cap on earnings for those coming in from abroad. Suella Braverman saying that they struck that deal for £40,000 to be the cap, something that's also been advocated by the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So look, it's a complicated issue. There's lots of people asking whether we should solve it by actually saying we need less cheap foreign labour in and more homegrown talent. Having said that, of course, there are concerns that if you say to people you can't come in unless you're coming into a job where you earn more than £40,000 a year, that basically rules out people wanting to work in the NHS or in care or in other customer-facing roles where people might not earn £40,000. So I'm going to ask you tonight, are we in danger of shooting ourselves in the foot here by saying that we should restrict foreign labour? At the end of the day, the reason why we have so many migrants is that there are jobs that they're willing to do that seemingly Brits aren't. So get in touch with me, email farage@gbnews.com or tweet #Farage on GB News. Let's bring Richard Bartram into the conversation now. He's an immigration lawyer. Richard, this proposal to, I don't know, put an earnings cap on those coming in of £40,000 has obviously raised alarm on the backbenches, particularly with One Nation Tories. I know Damien Green made the point, the former Deputy Prime Minister, that actually if you put a £40,000 cap, who are you going to get to do care work, to work in restaurants, to do other manual labour? Is it not realistic or not?
I don't think it's realistic. The background is that there is this shortage occupational skills list, and it's called that because these are jobs that are, that we need people to do. That's the bottom line. So we need people to do these jobs. There's a list. Each job has a pay scale on which one might bring someone from abroad. So unless we're going to pay the going rate to persons not from abroad, we are stuck with people from abroad. But it's by no means easy to bring a person from abroad to work in the NHS or anywhere else either. you're quite correct that it's going to knock out pretty much all but senior nurses, junior doctors in their first couple of years. That's just in the NHS. Care homes would be bereft, and
yes. I mean, I noted on care homes. It was interesting. Genric is saying that the health and social care visa, which has seen a 135% leap in applications to 144,000, was not working as well as even its proponents would have wished. But his suggestion is that care homes should pay people more, improve conditions, and improve productivity. These are the same care homes that were nearly wiped out by COVID, along with most of their residents. So is it really practical for care homes, or indeed anyone in the health sector, to be paying a care worker 40 grand? It's not, is it?
Well, I'm not alone, I think, with many of your viewers whose parents are somewhat elderly now, in their 70s, etc. And we all know what these care homes cost.
Yes. But they feel like they're cash-strapped because they're trying to provide 24-hour nursing care, all of people's residential costs, all of their food, occupational therapy. I mean, they're struggling, aren't they, even with the money that comes to them from county councils. And, by the way, they now have to add more money to the wage packet because of the increase to the national living wage.
Well, indeed. I don't think there are easy solutions, but we have to go back to what we want. Do we want more nurses? Do we want our elderly cared for? Do we want more doctors? And before we've even started on, do we want more scientists, computer scientists, whatever that speciality might be?
I mean, this shortage list has got quite a list of different people on it. Ballet dancers, specialist plasterers. I mean, it's quite an unusual and eclectic bunch of people we're trying to attract.
I remind myself that, in ancient Rome, Greeks came from Greek to build monuments. British stonemasons trekked around Europe building the great cathedrals.
I just mentioned the Greeks. We're going to be discussing the Elgin Marbles later in the show. But look, at the end of the day, you're an immigration lawyer. Yeah. These numbers are very, very high. We can talk about Hong Kong and Ukraine and kind of special circumstances that have been witnessed in the last 12 months. However, I mean, is there a sense to which we're a soft touch and we're not in control of our borders and we're letting a lot of people in because it's convenient to the British economy? More tax receipts seem to suggest that the economy is growing, and it's kind of like a political decision that the Tories don't want to own up to.
Well, it's certainly convenient for the economy. I think that's a given. So if we take that as a given, that it's good for our economy, let's look at what is the bad about it? What is the problem? Is it integration? Is it housing? Is it lack of resources? These people pay good money for their visas. They pay £600 a year to use the NHS, etc. So if we can accept that it's good for our economy, that we need these people, but there are other problems, let's look at those other problems and try to find a solution.
But how do you integrate 745,000 people a year? I mean, if the government had stuck to its repeated pledges about tens of thousands rather than hundreds of thousands, it's much easier, isn't it, to integrate 100,000 people or 200,000 people a year than close to 1 million?
These are challenges, and each country, European or other, faces them in different ways. One can look at what goes on in America or Switzerland, but we have to find our own path suitable for the UK.
But in your experience professionally, I mean, is it too easy to get into the country, do you think? Well, this Australian points-based system was meant to find the people that we really need, also nurture homegrown talent to do the jobs and fill some of those shortages. I mean, I appreciate we do have actually 1 million job vacancies at the moment, but we've got 300,000 people who could work that aren't and are on benefits. So we've got problems domestically, but are we also just a soft touch when it comes to allowing people in?
Well, I'm going to say no, and I'll explain why. Broadly speaking, one can come to the UK if you've got family here. I think that's both correct and moral, that if I happen to holiday in Greece and I fall in love with a Greek girl, that she should be able to come to the UK.
Should you bring over her grandparents?
That doesn't happen. The immigration rules are... but back in the day it did happen. There are a lot of stable doors that have not been bolted in the past, but the current set of immigration rules really closes the door on adult dependent relatives. It really is quite strict now on just spouse and children. The UK resident or national will have to have a minimum income so he can support his family. That increases if you're bringing children. So there's already a fairly high bar. It's not anyone can just bring anyone from abroad. So we have families, and that's people have families and people get married. And then we have workers, and we've already established that these are workers who we have declared that we need. The UK company applies for something called a sponsorship licence, pays lots of money for it, issues this certificate to the migrant. They then pay various fees and jump through hoops, and they come to a job which we have deemed is necessary, and we have deemed that no one else can fill.
Yeah.
So I really can't see a lot of wriggle room.
But it does feel somewhat, just to finish, Richard, a kind of system in a degree of chaos. I mean, is the Home Office to blame here? Because it seems to perhaps not be fit for purpose, very briefly.
To me, I actually have a great deal of respect from the Home Office. You might be finding that surprising. I've been in immigration law for 25 or more years. I've known a lot of immigration officers, but perhaps some of their historical knowledge is being lost, as in all organisations. Yes. If you ask the guys who are doing enforcement, they'll tell you what's going on. They'll know, they know what's going on.
OK. I mean, thank you very much for your contribution this evening, Richard Bartram, their immigration lawyer. Actually, I'm going to slightly contradict that a little later in the show, because there is a moment at a select committee, which we're going to show you a little bit later on, which shows that the Home Office might be in a bit of a state of disarray when it comes to tracking down those they haven't granted asylum to and where they actually are. But anyway, we're going to go live to the Gold Coast in just a moment to catch up with I'm a Celeb and all the latest from the jungle with Ben Leo. Stay tuned for that.
On State of the Nation tonight at 8 o'clock, I will be revealing some legislative legerdemain as a new law passes through the Commons mandating all manufacturers make 80% of car sales electric by 2030. This effectively bans petrol engines and undermines the Prime Minister's earlier promise. There's more royal drama as Omid Scobie, the blighter, with his divisive new book, is pulled from bookshelves in the Netherlands after allegedly naming a senior royal embroiled in the Sussex's race row. But is it really just a marketing gimmick? Plus, a mystery celebrity joins me to discuss the latest in the I'm a Celebrity saga ahead of Nigel Farage's hotly anticipated Bush Tucker trial this evening. On State of the Nation tonight at 8 o'clock.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new t-shirt. It's your new t-shirt.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. I asked you earlier, are we shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to trying to curb immigration? Not illegal immigration, we're not talking about that, we're talking about legal migration. And we're talking about whether we are importing too much cheap labour. Let's see what you had to say. Leslie writes, yes, put a £40,000 cap on. We have more than enough people to fill these jobs already. Any price is worth paying to stop migration, she says. Ian says, simples. By restricting immigration, the labour market tightens, so wage rises attract more currently idle people into the labour market. Jackie's making a point, to be fair, about illegal migrants, but let's just say it anyway. She's saying that the vast majority of illegal migrants want to work in the drugs trade, not the low-paid jobs Rishi envisages. But of course, if they come here illegally, they can't work anyway, so that's the difficulty there. Now, somebody who has been working hard is Ben Leo, who's in the Gold Coast, covering everything from the jungle. Have a little bit of sympathy because he's up by day and up by night, both watching the show and then reporting on it. And Ben, let's be honest, there's been quite a few developments, not necessarily in the jungle, but off it, as far as ITV and others are concerned. Fill us in on the latest.
Yeah, it seems to be more drama outside the jungle than there is inside at the moment. So yesterday, it was revealed ITV News were planning to drop a story this weekend to coincide with the first eviction vote in the jungle that accused Nigel Farage of recording a video a couple of years ago for a customer on the video service Cameo, which is where you basically pay celebrities £70 for a message that you write. They'll read it out. Tends to be birthday messages or anniversary messages, things like that. Anyway, Nigel was duped into reading this message, which contained a rather obscure, offensive term, which ITV News were claiming was racist. I can guarantee 90% of the audience would never have even heard of this term. I hadn't. And yeah, they were planning to drop it this weekend to kind of disgrace Nigel and call him a bigot, basically. Nigel's team have come out and said that he never would have recorded the video if he knew what the term meant. He was just reading from a script, and that word dupes was repeated. But it's funny, isn't it? It comes out just days after we exclusively revealed that Nigel was being censored in terms of his conversations in the camp. His airtime was being reduced, and it's no coincidence, as far as I'm concerned, that it was coming on the same weekends that the very first eviction votes came into play. Elsewhere, bit of housekeeping in the jungle. Jamie Lynn Spears has left on medical grounds. She was crying pretty much every day in the camp because she was missing her children. And there was a massive row that kicked off in last night's episode. Nigel, again, locking horns with campmates over Brexit, immigration, this time about cultural appropriation, where he pretty much said, I don't know what's allowed anymore. Are we allowed to dress up as Mexicans at fancy dress parties? Of course, he had a row with Nella Rose, the permanently offended Gen Z YouTuber, who would probably find offence at winning the lottery. But this was the moment where he locked horns with Nella.
It's rather like, you know, you go to a fancy dress party dressed as something, and now the press will say it's cultural appropriation.
Like what? Because if you was to do blackface, then it is wrong.
Dress as a Mexican or whatever it is, you know.
But yeah, because you can't use somebody's culture as a costume, as a fancy dress. The Mexican outfit is tradition to them. Like that's been in their culture for decades. That's why in America they don't dress up as Native Americans, because it's not a joke.
Yeah.
I don't know how people like Nella Rose, all these young kids, survive in the real world. They go through life looking for offence at everything. Actually, it's come out overnight that Anton Deck dressed up as Mexicans for an I'm a Celeb skit online. And Nella, according to the bookies, she's now out to 150 to 1 to win the series. So viewers aren't liking her perma-offended stance. Elsewhere, Nigel is in tonight's trial. Although he's been smashing his Bush Tucker trials recently, he downs drinks and whatever else with ease, pretty much. He does come a bit of a cropper tonight. It's an underwater challenge, so all eyes on that. And as I said previously, the evictions start this weekend. And one final thing, can I just pan to this amazing sunrise here on the Gold Coast? I'm going to show off on this one occasion because it's been raining pretty much every day for 2 weeks here. So yeah, I'm just going to delight you all with that beautiful scene from the Aussie coastline. But yeah, ITV's planned hit job not going to plan. I think anyone with an ounce of common sense can see that it's exactly that. It's a hit job on Nigel, and it's coincided to smear him and his time in the jungle because he is doing so well.
Ben, thank you very much for that indeed. Glad to see that you're soaking up some sun at last. It's a hard job, but somebody has got to do it. Up next, we're going to be discussing a latest banking spying scandal. Would you like the idea of your bank being able to have a look at all of your accounts whenever they choose and indeed let the government do the same? We'll be discussing that in just a moment.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Now, before we talk about this bank spying scandal, let's speak to Armando Regil, a Mexican entrepreneur and economist in New York City, who is going to tell us whether he agrees with this suggestion that dressing up in a sombrero is cultural misappropriation. Armando, what's your view? Should we be dressing up as Mexicans or not?
Thank you very much. Well, this is a great question. Of course, I am a great advocate of freedom, and I think every person should wear as he or she pleases. And wearing Mexican is always a way of feeling proud of our own history, of our own culture, of our own traditions. Sombreros are great. There are so many colors in the Mexican clothes. So, of course, I think this is just nonsense. But many people think that this kind of clothes sometimes offend the sensibilities of others, which I completely disagree.
But also, surely, Armando, the idea of people dressing as Mexicans is meant to be embracing their culture, really, and celebrating it, as opposed to denigrating it?
I think it's a way of celebrating, of course. Denigrating is something that we should just forget about, because every time we wear our Mexican clothes is a way of honoring our own culture, our own traditions, our past, our history. And as I said, I just don't find, it's silly and funny that some people think otherwise. But of course, everyone is free of thinking whatever people want.
OK, Armando, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. Give our love to the Big Apple. Thank you very much. There you have it then. Well, a Mexican says there's nothing wrong with wearing a sombrero, so let's take it from him. Now, let's get into this banking spying scandal, which is quite astonishing, really. So a bank spying clause has been added to the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill. The last-minute amendment would force banks to survey the accounts of welfare recipients and the people linked to those payments. To explain a bit more about what exactly has happened, I'm joined now by Mariano De Santi, a legal and policy officer. Mariano, what's gone on here? Who's tabled this amendment? It's come out of the blue, seemingly.
Yes. So this was an amendment that was tabled by the government for the UK data protection reform, which was first presented in November 2021. It has since gained widespread criticism for a number of reasons, including the extent of the powers that the government will be given to justify the collection of personal data of British citizens or residents. The government always said this was not a problem. However, what happened is with this amendment, we had first of all more than 230 amendments being presented a couple of days before the debate in Parliament,
right,
mostly by the government. The amendment in question, the one about granting access to DWP, or generally speaking, the government to banking data, is indeed quite concerning, because fundamentally it's an amendment that gives a power for the government to have access to bank accounts, or generally speaking, accounts linked to a financial institution,
yes,
according to what the government believes it is relevant for them in order to carry out a public task. It does so not only for the people who receive benefits, but also for the people who are linked with people who receive benefits. This could mean members of family. This could
be anyone.
Mean tenants, like what.
I mean, my understanding is previously the DWP needed to have some evidence of perhaps fraudulent activity in order to ask banks to release the accounts of individuals. But this seems to be suggesting that there don't need to be any reasonable grounds for suspicion at all, that these bank accounts can just be handed over to the government.
Indeed, and the way the government have presented these amendments is indeed to make those checks regular checks. So fundamentally, the government wants the power to be routinely scrutinizing what is going on in your bank account and possibly take action if they believe there is a suspicion of fraud coming from those activities.
I mean, how sinister do you think this is? We're very used to these days, I think, being spied upon, Big Brother, CCTV, the information we put online, devices seemingly listening to us. But actually looking into our bank affairs without reasonable justification or cause strikes me as being very Orwellian.
Well, I mean, speaking about what the law is supposed to do in a democratic country is to put boundaries in terms of what the government is or is not allowed to do when they exercise their powers. what this bill will do is exactly to put such boundaries which are so big and so extend to a point where they become meaningless. I mean, like, what is it that is not relevant for checking if you're committing a fraud? What is it that, who is not linked to somebody who's receiving benefits? In a more, let's say, general terms, I guess it's this law treats everybody as a suspect, and it shouldn't be, let's say, up to you to prove that you're innocent, and that the government shouldn't stick the nose into your bank account, but it should be for the government to justify why they want to have access to your bank account.
Although, as we've learned with the esteemed host of this show, who is currently in the jungle, banks seem to think that they can say anything about anyone and investigate anything that they like without due cause anyway. Mariano, thank you for filling us in on that aspect. Sarah Dines, the MP for Derbyshire Dales, I'm going to bring you into the conversation because I know you raised banking in general with Rishi Sunak at PMQ.
Yes.
What's happened in your constituency?
Well, I'm very concerned. I represent the fabulous Derbyshire Dales, which is a wonderful tourist place, but it also is home to a lot of elderly people and a lot of rural economic businesses. And what the National Westminster Bank have done without any consultation, which isn't acceptable for a bank where the public owns 39% of the shares, is they've just announced they're closing it. No consultation, that's it, which will leave the whole of the Peak District without a single high street bank.
No, the whole of the Peak District?
Yes, and don't forget we have 13 million people visit the Peak District. They all come and buy fudge, they come and buy Bakewell puddings in Bakewell, Bakewell tarts, they come with cash. So what do the small business people do? Derbyshire Dales is full of small entrepreneurs, and a lot of them aren't very good online. I'm not against going online, it's great for people in the city, and it's great for people that have Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, broadband is not great. We're one of the areas where the government's having to subsidise rollout of proper services. So it's extraordinarily arrogant, with respect, for a big bank just to do that. And bearing in mind the public owned 39% of the shares, it's extraordinary they didn't even bother to talk to the Member of Parliament.
I mean, to be fair, NatWest's justification for this will be that they don't have much footfall in that particular branch, that more people are going online, that there are different ways to bank these days. You know, amazingly, you can cash a cheque now, can't you, through your own mobile phone? I mean, they have a point on that. But you're saying, well, that's great for younger people, but what about the elderly and the vulnerable?
Absolutely. I mean, I've had my inbox, obviously as a constituents MP, is full of fraud cases. I've had elderly people, one lost £37,000 online and will never use online again. What do you say to my 85-year-olds, my 90-year-olds? We really need to be proportionate about how we treat the public. And the country isn't just the metropolitan bubble. And even NatWest's own inquiries, which they've shown me after their decision, is that there's about 60% of people are online for banking. Well, that means there's 40% that aren't. What are they supposed to do with their money? It's quite a scary and an arrogant development. So I'm very disappointed. I'd ask them to look at it again. I know they have sensible people at NatWest, at least I hope they do, and I hope they look at it again, because Derbyshire Dales is a very special place, and the Peak District, it cannot just be compared to other parts of the UK, and it's almost as if the average person in the rest of the country that doesn't live in a city is almost forgotten now.
Do you think that the PM is taking this seriously? You're not the only one. We did a story today on the Telegraph about Barclays closing a branch in Hove and instead having customers go to a graveyard and maintain face-to-face banking services via a van in a graveyard. Apparently this is a temporary measure. We can see the van now on the screen. Look at that. Go and bank in a graveyard. I mean, what elderly person wouldn't want to do their banking this way, Sarah? But do you think the PM is taking it seriously enough?
Well, I've had a discussion with him about it, and of course he looks at what the regulatory regime is, and they're suggesting that you can use the post office, but I have to say, I have one constituent whose son died as an adult and had a lot of stuff to sort out.
Yeah, of course.
And if you think you could do that over the telephone,
no, you can't.
Sometimes with somebody who English may not be as good as our English, it's just not really the sort of service. And can I mention one human story too?
Really quickly.
I was very touched that there were the memorials for people who've died in both World Wars. Over the whole of the Peak District. Every time they've closed a branch, it's gone to this last branch. What do we do with the 5 or 6 genuine memorials? They're going to be sent somewhere else. How unkind is that?
Also, I think if you close a bank down in a high street, you kill the high street, which is another problem.
Absolutely.
We have to leave it there. Sarah Dines, Mariano Deli Santi, thank you very much indeed for discussing two important issues to us because, of course, we've got our Don't Kill Cash campaign still running and still gaining momentum. Now, let's move on to a different story entirely. We have covered it this week, but there is a development in the story of Endgame, the royal book written by Omid Scobie. So a Dutch publisher, we discussed this briefly last night, but let's get a little bit more detail on it. A Dutch publisher has had to pulp copies naming 2 alleged royal racists. The author Omid Scobie suggests it's a translation error, but if the pair weren't named in the English version, I can't quite work out how they've ended up in the Dutch one. It does come after Scobie bragged on US TV that he knew the names of both alleged racists. So it's a bit of a mystery, this. Let's see if Femi Nylander, an activist and a regular to GB News, can help clear up some of this confusion. Femi, you'll be familiar with the initial allegation. It was made by Meghan on Oprah Winfrey back in the day when they appeared in that bombshell interview where it was suggested that a royal had made a comment about her and Harry's unborn child's skin tone. Clearly there was a degree of curiosity as to what the baby might look like with a mixed-race mother and a ginger-haired father, and this comment was made. Femi, clear this up for me. Is this the kind of discussion that takes place between black and mixed-race parents as to what their children look like, or do you perceive it to be racist?
I mean, you just have to look at the history of the comments made by some members of the royal family and then make your own judgment. I mean, Prince Philip, late Prince Philip, talked about Chinese students having slitty eyes. He talked about spear-throwing natives. He made loads of racist comments. All of it, he was known for it, going around making gaffes, i.e. racist comments. It's an institution which is based on the idea of kind of conquest and empire, and it's clear to me that talking about a triviality as to whether or not Archie's skin colour was this or that, the rest, the royal family is rooted in the idea of racism. It's part and parcel to the royal family. So
they would deny that, Femi. They would deny that, Femi. I mean, we heard from Prince William, didn't we, in the aftermath of the interview, saying we're very much not a racist family. I think the King would point to some of the multi-faith, multi-diverse events that he's attended, been at the helm of, his coronation and all the rest of it. However, just on that point of discussing skin tone, is skin tone discussed by black and mixed race couples or not?
Most black and mixed race couples, most kind of people who have a black person and a white person will not go and pontificate over what colour their child is going to come out, because they've entered a consensual agreement between two people. If I was to marry someone who was white, it's pretty clear that my kid is not going to look very like white. I'm a quarter white. My grandma is more white than you. She's from Borrowdale. However, I look phenotypically very black because of the way genetics work. Is the way genetics work. My little brother looks a lot lighter than me. People know this when they go into. But if the granddad then goes, I wonder if he's going to be a bit dark. My kid, my grandson. Then it starts to become a bit weird. Why are people in the family pontificating over the first member of the royal family who is not going to be lily white, and worrying or pondering or asking questions about what kind of skin tone they're going to have? Why does that matter?
It might not have been worrying. It might have just been curiosity. Femi, final question: do you think that these 2 alleged royal racists should be named in the public interest?
I mean, I think that...
Oh, Femi, I've lost you. I've lost your sound. We won't get that answer. I mean, for legal reasons, of course, we can't name them, but it has the problem, doesn't it, that if you don't name them, then everyone's pointing the finger at everybody in the royal family. Let's see if Femi's back with us. Femi, can you hear me? Femi, can you hear me? Very quick answer. Should these racists, allegedly, these royal racists, be named? Yes or no?
I mean, there's no legal reason to, but I do think that Harry and Meghan should out. I mean, if someone makes a racist comment, I'll happily out them. If someone makes a comment which is said to possibly be racist, I'll happily say who it is. But I mean, obviously we don't know who they are. But yeah, I think why shouldn't we know who made that comment? Okay,
Femi Nylander, thank you very much for joining me this evening. Now, as you know, we have a What the Farage moment every night on this show, which I have renamed Can You Believe It? And I was watching Parliament TV, as you do, catching up on a Home Affairs Select Committee earlier today. And who should pop up but our very own Lee Anderson, my fellow GB News presenter, who was quizzing Home Office officials about whether they knew where different people were that had been let into the country. Now, John Reid, former Home Secretary, said back in 2006, the Home Office is not fit for purpose. Can you believe the following exchange, which I'm going to play you now?
Put foreign offenders aside and Albanians aside, just forget about those numbers. How many people travelling on small boats that's been refused asylum have been sent to a third country or back to their own country over the past 3 years?
I don't think we have. I
think we'll write to the committee with those numbers, Mr. Anderson. That's staggering. That's actually staggering. Okay, then let's do it for the last year.
I don't have a number for non-Albanian, non-FNOs.
Perhaps they might be able to help you.
Let's do last week then.
Do we have any figures about anything?
No? Yes.
In the last 6 months, just how many in the last 6 months?
As Simon said, there are charter flights and other ways of doing returns the whole time, constantly, and we can give you whatever timeline return period you'd like.
People who are coming here.
Have you ever heard anything like it in your life? These are the people in charge of the Home Office who don't seem to know where a load of asylum seekers who haven't been granted asylum actually are. Can you believe it? What the Farage? And all the rest of it. Now, after this, we're going to be asking, has Rishi Sunak lost his marbles? We're going to be discussing, of course, the argument with the Greek counterpart about what happens to the Elgin Marbles in the future. Stay tuned for that.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Right, let's discuss whether the Prime Minister may have lost his marbles. Rishi Sunak has escalated the row over the Elgin Marbles by accusing his Greek opposite number, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, of grandstanding over the issue. This is what he said in PMQs earlier today.
When it was clear that the purpose of a meeting was not to discuss substantive issues for the future, but rather to grandstand and relitigate issues of the past, it wasn't appropriate. But furthermore, when specific commitments and specific assurances on that topic were made to this country and then were broken, it may seem alien to him, but my view is when people make commitments, they should keep them.
There you have it from the Prime Minister. GB News' reporter Adam Cherry headed over to the British Museum earlier to ask the important question: has Rishi Sunak lost his marbles?
Rishi Sunak had cancelled his meeting with the Greek Prime Minister?
No, he shouldn't.
Why not?
Get this sorted out.
Has he lost his marbles?
He may have done.
I think it's absolutely pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Why not meet the Prime Minister of an important European country?
I think the marbles should go back.
They should go back. Why do you think they should go back?
Because they were robbed.
Should the marbles stay here in the British Museum, or should they be in Greece?
I suppose really they do belong to Greece, don't they?
Probably in Greece. There's a lot of stuff in there that probably shouldn't be in there.
It was a long time ago, let's face it, and you start giving things like that back, and then where do you end?
I would have definitely gone to the meeting, you know. Can't go wrong.
I should have met him, really, yeah. Yeah, you're not going to get anything out about cancelling. You're not going to get any resolution there, are you? All you're going to do is dictate how we're keeping them. So you need to come to some compromise somewhere along the line.
And do you think that was wrong? Do you think he should have met him?
It was very wrong.
Would you say Rishi Sunak's lost his marbles this morning?
Yeah, many.
I would say he's lost his marbles, yeah, definitely.
There's always time for a politician to lose their marbles.
Has Rishi Sunak lost his marbles?
I'm answering that.
Well, let's see if Roger Michael, Executive Director of the Institute for Digital Archaeology, will answer the question: has Rishi Sunak lost his marbles?
You know, look, if that was politicking that we just saw, it's some of the worst politicking I've ever seen. I've talked to lots of folks in Greece today. He's the most popular guy in Greece this morning. I mean, he took an issue that had faded from the headlines, put it back on the front pages of all the national dailies. Telegraph writes yet another editorial in favor of repatriation. He's just not reading the room. I mean, this has been the case with Rishi Sunak from the beginning. Look, if he's a conservative, he's thinking, okay, conservatism, it's about things have to stay the same. Yes, at some level, but conservatism is always built on nationalism, national pride, and Greek sculptures in the British Museum is not about British national pride. That's Greek national pride. He's just not getting it, and the polls reflect that.
Just remind us of the history of this. Lord Elgin goes in 1816, takes these marbles. He thinks that he's done it legally, and in fact, the British consensus is that it was a legal act and that we're entitled to keep them.
Well, I mean, that's really not, with all due respect, that's not really the history. The history is that Lord Elgin, in cahoots with a couple of his friends in government, decided that, hey, we've got an opportunity here. There's disarray in Athens. The Turks are here. They're breaking stuff up. No one's really in charge. We can spirit these things out of the country. And letters discovered in the Elgin archive as recently as last year support this 100%. They hatched a plan to bring these things back to England and to sell these as garden ornaments to their rich friends. And they hope to make a bundle of money out of it. And Castlereagh, his good friend, foreign minister, arranged to bring them into the country with no duties paid, and together they hope to make a fortune by selling these marbles. Unfortunately, the market changed as the market for antiquities up and down over the last 200 years, went through the floor, and it took them 10 years to sell these things. In the end, they couldn't do it, and so Castlereagh again came to his aid and got Parliament to reach into their pockets and pay for these things. So this was always it was a scam from the beginning. It was a scam straight way through, and it was a scam when Parliament paid Elgin the money money that he had laid out ostensibly.
So let me play devil's advocate, because you've spoken about the need to conserve, as the Conservatives might, and that seems to be the Prime Minister's position. I mean, you could argue that if we give the marbles back, it's then the thin end of the wedge. What else needs to be repatriated to other countries? Isn't it quite nice to have artefacts from different countries in different countries to make sure that as many people as possible can see them?
When they serve a useful purpose, absolutely. The reality is, when people walk into that Duveen gallery, they are not seeing the Greece of antiquity. They're seeing a fantasy. When those sculptures emerged from Phidias's studio, they were brightly painted, they had all of their fingers and toes, they were architectural ornaments, they were meant to exist in a particular context. When you see these pieces of sculpture denuded of their color, denuded of arms and legs and faces, and dropped on the floor of this sad little gallery, dark little flooded gallery in the British Museum, it doesn't just not teach you about antiquity, it teaches you the opposite of the truth about antiquity. Lay on top of that the fact that every ultranationalist organization, including Nazi Germany, exploited the whiteness, the artificial whiteness of these objects for political purposes, and there's no good reason to keep those things.
How about the thin end of the wedge argument?
They've got 6.5 million objects. Believe me, repatriating this 153 objects is not going to impact their ability to do what they're setting out to do, teach people about the aesthetics of ancient Greece, or more generally show art in context. Greece is willing to offer in return some really extraordinary things, including the Agamemnon mask. I mean, these are real treasures that in fact do teach people about the aesthetics of antiquity. The British Museum could do a much better job if they took the deal that George Osborne's come up with.
What, this loan?
Yeah, some kind of partnership. I mean, whether you call it a loan, a partnership, a collaboration, I don't know what it is, but the Greeks have the same goal as I think George Osborne does, which is to teach people about their history in a positive kind of way.
Roger Michael, thank you very much for joining me this morning and sharing your expertise. Jacob Rees-Mogg, good evening.
Camilla Tominey, good evening. Very nice to see you.
You've been quite outspoken about immigration in the last 24 hours, and you've said that you think that if the government doesn't solve this issue, it's going to be electorally disastrous for them.
Well, it's obviously difficult that we promised tens of thousands in 2010. We reiterated a promise to control migration in 2019, and we had 1.4 million people arrive in 2 years to the end of June 2023. Now, this just isn't good enough. We can't promise voters one thing and fail to deliver it. And legal migration is much, much easier to deal with than illegal. It's simply a matter of statutory instruments and government regulation.
Robert Jenrick had made that point in the House yesterday that, you know, he would have introduced these measures last Christmas if he had a choice, which seemed to suggest that Number 10 keeps on blocking this.
Well, I don't know what's going on between Number 10 and ministers.
No.
They don't tell me.
Shame. Why don't you tell me who you've got coming up on your show and what you're going to be covering?
Well, what I'm going to be talking about to start with is we had this promise from Rishi Sunak that we were going to allow petrol cars to carry on.
Yes.
And then we had a regulation in the House of Commons this morning to stop it pretty much in 2030. So I don't understand what's going on.
No, I don't either. And anything else?
Well, that's going to be the main thing. We're also going to be talking about the jungle and Mr. Farage.
To hear you talk about the jungle.
Well, I watched the programme. I thought it was as dull as ditchwater. I cannot understand why anybody tunes in.
Brilliant. Stay tuned for Jacob discussing all things jungle-related. I'll be back tomorrow night at 7 as ever. But first of all, here's the weather before Jacob comes on air.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Thursday will be another cold day. There's still some dry and sunny weather to be had, but we do also have some snow and ice warnings in force for Thursday morning. Across the northeast, we could see some snow showers continuing throughout tonight, but it's across the southwest where this area of rain will push up from the south, bumping into the colder air, bringing some snow to southern areas, mainly across the high ground of Devon and Cornwall, but we could see a dusting of snow as far east as parts of Wiltshire. So potentially some snow and ice out there tomorrow morning. There's also an ice risk across parts of Northern Ireland as well, and it will be a cold start. Once again, a colder start than this morning, tomorrow morning. The snow showers will continue across northeastern areas throughout Thursday. This area of rain, sleet and snow will continue to affect the far southwest as well through much of the day before it does then sink southwards into the evening. In between though, we've got a good deal of sunshine. It will be feeling cold though. Temperatures still only reaching 3 or 4 degrees for many areas. Some areas of Scotland sticking with a frost all day. So another very cold start to Friday. Much of that rain has now cleared the south, but we will see some patches of freezing fog around. These could be quite slow to clear throughout Friday. And elsewhere though, a good amount of sunshine once again. A bit more sunshine to come throughout Saturday and Sunday, and the temperatures could start to rise a little in the south by the end of weekend.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
So